whatever it is that it does when
Yeah,
it's thinking really hard about starting the live stream.
all those
Uh,
big underground gears are turning really hard.
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, all the people down in the Substack machine rooms
That's right.
working away.
Getting crushed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's funny actually because you have more knowledge of the story and what's coming up than any of the people like actually reading it so far. So yeah. Right, we have some people showing up. So let's kick off. Hello, everybody. I'm Simon. I'm the writer of the Write More newsletter and a bunch of serial fiction, including The Mechanical Crown, which just kicked off with its first chapter last week, which means that anyone interested in that will also have seen its new front cover, which is designed by Shane here. And Shane, do you want to do a little mini intro to yourself and where you've come from and what have you?
Yeah, sure thing. Shane Bzdok. I am a graphic designer. I'm based in Austin, Texas, and I've been a professional designer for almost 3 decades. Joined Substack a few years ago with the intent of kind of expanding on my writing, and then I started doing book covers for writers here, and that now has become almost another full-time job for me. So, been doing a lot of that, and Simon's cover is my latest, and definitely. I love the way it turned out. Super proud and excited to talk about it.
Yeah, and the good, I mean, I love it, but the good news is that everyone who's given us feedback so far seems to like it as well. So all good. I like that you sort of almost ended up being like this increasingly recognized and sought after cover designer on Substack, but that wasn't really your initial intent behind being on the platform.
No, it wasn't. And when I'm a very passionate designer. I love what I do, and I do it all the time. And so, in a way, I suppose it's kind of fate or whatever. Like I love to design, so I just kind of naturally gravitated toward opportunities to design, even in this environment that is built around writing. But that really happened when I worked on the original Midnight Vault, and that was my very first cover, and that cover, there was 28 other writers on that project, and so that the work I did for that cover got a lot of commissions from those other writers, and that just kind of snowballed and has expanded, and word of mouth and all the things into a pretty. I think I've got three more covers coming up, so. Pretty stacked and very happy to be doing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
No. Well, I'm really pleased to have been able to sneak into your busy schedule and get in there. Because a little bit of background from my perspective, like as anyone who saw my newsletter on Monday would have seen, my general way of doing this kind of stuff is to DIY everything. So I've always done my own covers to varying degrees of success. I've got a long history of Mechanical Crown covers that are pretty ropey. I've done some okay covers for other projects more recently than the kind of older versions of that stuff. But yeah, this was the first time I've worked with another designer properly. And that was a mixture of financially being able to do it, thanks to the support I've had through the newsletter, and thinking actually this is the time to invest a little bit in this major project that was coming up. Also just trying something new. I think I love doing my own illustrations and design stuff. I think sometimes when it has that DIY cobbled together kind of nature to it, there's still something quite nice about that because it's still very much me. So that's a nice aspect. So actually making the leap to working and collaborating with somebody else was a big decision for me, because even though it became a possibility practically,
Right.
my brain was kind of like, do I want to do this or not?
Sure.
It was a tricky one. So then it was about deciding who to work with, and I looked into loads of different options, but I was aware of your work, I think through the Midnight Vault anthology. That was the initial point. And then looking at the other stuff you've done, just really liked it. So I think the Fragile Steps and Tiny Worlds covers, just really great. And what I kind of became aware of, I suppose, in terms of what I was looking for, is that what I didn't want was a more sort of painterly literal description of the book. which is, a very common thing in fantasy adventure novels.
Yeah.
I wanted to go more down the kind of graphic design route to create something a bit more striking in that way, rather than just being like, here's a cool painting of something that happens in the book, which is how I ended up with you, I suppose.
Yeah. I think style is a big one. If you're in the market for a designer for your cover, you really have to find one that speaks to the style that you prefer, that you like, you want to see on your cover. And it's mostly because the designer that you're going to work with, unless they're some type of demigod, they're not able to execute in just any style. And so they all have their personal preferences. A lot of designers have, kind of signature house styles, quote unquote. I sort of do, I definitely lean into like kind of what you described, very graphic look and feels, very high contrast. I prefer that stuff. I even told you, I was like, what I don't do is these like, really rich textured painterly type covers that you see in most mass market fantasy. It's just not to my taste, and I can't do that. So.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of like the authors that you've worked with so far, have you found that there's a particular type of book or type of author that you like to work with, or has it just been a big range of all sorts of stuff?
It has been a range, and most of it at this point, because I'm still relatively new to designing covers. I haven't done a ton. And so to me, every single opportunity is exciting. I'm really interested in just doing another cover and helping another author and making something really cool together. But personally, like my personal taste, I'm a big sci-fi lover, dystopian. I devoured fantasy in my younger days. I grew up on Dungeons and Dragons and and all that stuff, and so Tolkien. And so this honestly was really near and dear to my heart, and I was really excited about this cover, and it was just fun. Like from every angle, this was such a fun cover, and you were such a great partner along the way.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think for me it was such a new experience because I had no idea what you would need or want for me in terms of the cover, and I was very conscious that I didn't want to just dictate to you what I wanted, because that'd be completely pointless. So I'd been dabbling with some ideas, and I was very cautious about what I provided you. So I said, like, here's some things I've been fiddling with, but feel free to ignore those, and here's some details about the story and what have you. And from your point of view, like, how much information is useful and how much is too much? Like, how do you kind of figure that one out with each of the people that you've worked with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the other interesting part about my experience designing book covers is that I don't have a mentor. I don't have somebody who's done this a billion times saying, this is how you're supposed to do it. And so I've kind of got my own process that seems to be working. As you know, I start out asking for a creative brief, and that brief, I always want things in there like the story summary. I want to know about the key characters, descriptions of those characters, and most importantly, what are some key themes in the book? And you're going to know best, really. And maybe surprisingly to some people, I do not read the books that I design the covers for. I've only done that once, read the whole book. And it's mostly a matter of, I just don't have that kind of time. So I really rely on these briefs, and what you gave me was fantastic. I just need to get an understanding of the story. I need to get an understanding of the themes, and I'm looking for nuggets that I can latch on to and kind of build from. And I thought, what you mentioned this in a post, I think, but it was something. Oh, my screen just went to sleep. But it was something to the effect of, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought now. That totally threw me.
Something I'd mentioned in a post, apparently.
Yeah. I'll have to come back to it.
I've done a lot of posts to narrow it down.
Yeah. But I don't know if there's too much information. The book asking me to read the book is probably too much. So getting those like key nuggets is really what is helpful.
Yeah, and I think what we sort of ended up, I think this comes back to, you can go the painterly route where you depict the characters and the setting or the landscape or some such, or you can go down the route we've gone down, which is more representative of some of the themes and the atmosphere and the tone of the piece. And
More
I think,
yeah.
yeah, and that's something that I found like in my writing over the years, where like if you go way back to like my 20s, in fact, when I did the very, very earliest draft of this kind of thing, I was very much more focused on plot. And I thought plot was the most important thing, and you had to have a really detailed, twisty plot, and that's what made a good book. And then over the years, obviously, I've realized actually the plot is probably the least interesting and least important part of a book.
Yeah.
It's all the other bits that you need. And I think drilling into, what are the themes, what's the feeling that we want to create with this cover, because actually, for a potential reader, it's less interesting to go, oh, here's a lovely picture of some mountains and a person with a sword standing on a hill, or that kind of thing.
Yep.
Whereas what you've come up with, someone viewing that doesn't really know what it means, but they can feel that something's going on. There's a mystery to it and an oppressiveness, and but like, I don't want to go down the cliched route of like, where'd you get your ideas from?
Yes. Sure.
But it's almost, how did that process go?
Yeah, I will come back to what I was going to say, because I remember, and it was, you posted something about that how you saw your story interpreted through a different set of eyes. It was something to that effect. It was that general idea, and how interesting that was. So I find that super fascinating too. You clearly wrote the story. You have a certain vision in your head. You gave me sketches in the beginning, which were fantastic. And then to your point, I took the notes that you gave me and I translated those into the image that we have now. And for me, like talking about process, the exploration part is so nonlinear, and I just posted a post today about my process for Harmony House, where I talk about how messy the creative process is. And I believe it needs to be. Like there's no kind of patented formula for coming up with these designs. And anybody who's written or done any creative endeavor knows that on a good day, you're lucky to get that like lightning strike of inspiration. And where things, you're of course, you're doing your due diligence. You have to seek out ideas. You can't just assume they're going to come. But if you seek them out and you're open, you keep your senses open to all these different inputs and inspiration, chances are some of that stuff's going to connect. And that's what forms that idea, And so for me, you kind of describe the setting, and there's this like underworld of machine rooms and gears, and then, you did mention that it's got like a flavor of steampunk. And so, for me, like the instant gut thing I had was like, hell, I'm not going to do all the expected things, and fill it with gears and kind of do the kind of cliche steampunky styles and type and all those things. I wanted to do something different. But that machine room thing really kind of felt like a central theme. This whole idea of this kind of oppressive regime was also playing heavily into like my color palettes and just the vibe and the mood that I was trying to set. And all of that stuff comes together and it's in a big soup. and then from that soup, you're relying honestly on experience and skill and all the things you've learned and how to translate that kind of abstract thought into something that has form. And, in this case, we kind of latched onto this really, really awesome concept that I dug up. It was the first, in the first round that I presented. And I knew it was good. And thank you for trusting me, because we took that all the way. But I want to tell everybody who's listening how great of a partner Simon was. I don't assume I can do this on my own ever. And I'm relying heavily on on collaboration with the author because they know the story better than I do. And it's us working together. But beyond that, it's like also kind of a taste thing. I've got my own preferences for how this stuff expresses itself. I tend to lean maybe more flat, vector shape kind of stuff. But I presented this more rendered version to Simon, and he was like, "That's the direction I like. I want to go," and I'm thankful that he selected that. And he was giving me great suggestions along the way. I had all these kind of mini, like smaller gears in frame, and it was kind of a lot more busy in some ways, and not busy enough in others. And so Simon was great and just giving some awesome suggestions that really took it to the level it is. So thanks for
just felt like little nudges here and there, like the idea was there from the start. It was interesting for me because having I've worked in sort of marketing and communications over the years, so I'm more used to being the one presenting like the ideas and the sketches and the videos or what have you, so being on the other end and having you show me that stuff was it was slightly nerve-wracking actually. Like it probably should have been more nerve-wracking for you almost, but for me I was like, oh, this is a really strange experience having collaborated with somebody and now they're going to show me what they've done and I have no idea how I'm going to react to any of this, which it felt like a sort of high stakes situation, but I think it was actually fine.
I think people often underestimate how to give feedback. Like it's not as simple as you might expect, and some people are really great at it and some people struggle, but it's
definitely.
So
in my experience being on the other end of it as well, people's gut reactions often then get vocalized in a way that actually is not the correct description of what they're thinking about a thing, and that as on the designer end you have to sort of translate what the person's actually trying to say
for sure
to figure out.
For sure happens all the time. And I often talk about that too in my professional work as a designer. We have a thing called first look, and it is all about that gut reaction to seeing something for the very first time, because that's a very distinct moment when a design is presented. You'll never have that moment again. So you see it for the first time, and what's your gut, and then process that to your point, like maybe actually take time to think about it and then be able to put that into words. But it's a big moment for sure.
Yeah, because we had that initial round where you had, was it 3 or 4 very different ideas?
Yeah.
And then we latched on to the gears concept, which then progressed into the next stage where you provided a bunch of different sort of rendering styles, different fonts, all that kind of stuff, and it was trying to nail down the specific details of it. And I think what surprised me is, although the concept was there right from the very initial kind of version you did, the distance from there to the finished version felt quite large. Even though the overall framing and all that kind of stuff was there from the beginning. Actually, all those little details and little tweaks here and there took it a long way, I think.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's that whole aspect of the last 10 feet, right? Getting really close takes a lot of effort, but the last 10 feet maybe takes the most effort. And I believe that. So, but that's also the part where, we're just really trying to sand it down and make it as good as it can possibly be. Will it ever be perfect? Probably not, but try to get it close.
Exactly. You can always tinker with these things forever.
That's
Michael
right.
in the chat has asked an interesting question, which is, have the lush fantasy covers of the 80s and 90s become passé, or was the cover for the Mechanical Crown just a personal design choice / style?
That's a great question.
That's an interesting one. I mean, well, what's your sense on that as a designer and someone also, as you say, you love the sort of D&D stuff, back in the 80s, which obviously was all in on that kind of lush fantasy design thing. But I think you still get a lot of that these days, right?
I agree. I don't think it's out of fashion. I think it's maybe evolved to some different flavors, but you're always going to find that stuff on the shelf. And I'm not dissing it. Like, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's different, and it's not something I'm capable of doing. So I'm just leaning in. My mentor, my early career mentor, he said, I don't try to go outside, my skill set. I just focus on doing really great work with what I can do, and do the best to the best of your ability. And so that's really what I focus on. I don't pay a lot of attention to other cover styles. I'm not trying to avoid anything per se. I'm just kind of doing what I love and enjoy, and it's just naturally coming out in the expressions that I'm able to express. And so I guess what I'm lucky to be doing now is finding authors who connect with my style, and who connect with what I do and want me to do more of it. And that's kind of how we ended up here.
Yeah. And I think for my part, I suppose it was more of a conscious decision, because some
Yeah.
of the other artists I was looking at were very able to do that kind of more lush style, and their portfolio was more down that route. I had some people get in touch who that was very much what they did, and it was beautiful stuff. It was amazing. So yeah, the decision to go down the more graphic route and then specifically kind of seek you out, having seen your other work, was that was very much a choice, I think. And part of that is trying to stand out a little bit, trying to come up with a cover that would actually get noticed in a sea of very potentially technically beautiful, artistically beautiful covers, but which are all kind of genre tropey standard fare, I suppose.
That can absolutely be a strategy. There is no doubt. Do you want to stand out in nowadays sea of thumbnails on a screen, or and then the other strategy is just focusing on your story and making it look the way you want it to look, and really not caring about any of the other stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think
a good story will rise to the top. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. I think 10, 15 years ago, I probably would have gone down the kind of lush fantasy cover route more willingly without thinking too much about it. And I think tonally, like the draft of the story that existed back then would have suited that more as well. Whereas the version I'm serializing through the newsletter now, there's going to be some tonal sort of atmospheric style differences, which I think your cover better represents the experience the reader's going to be getting from this new version as well.
I think, Simon, I want to point to a moment when that I was so proud of. You, in our early stuff, when I was presenting the work, you mentioned how the things that I was sharing was actually kind of giving you some ideas for changes to the story. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think for people who don't know, I serialized a version of this story back in 2016 over on Wattpad. The version I'm now putting out on the newsletter is going to be not a complete rewrite, but significantly overhauled. And the previous version was very much kind of YA aimed. I think it was, aimed at teenage and up kind of readers. So we're not talking like George R.R. Martin style fantasy. It was, a very accessible adventure. And I'm not planning to go full grimdark with the new version, but I think I do envision it as being a slightly more mature, grown up version of the same story, essentially. And I was kind of trying to figure out how far I wanted to go that way, and then seeing your cover designs come in, I think helped to clarify that in my head. Because, if I had the story associated with the old covers that I'd done, which were very much, castle on the hill, sunset, and, had that kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but that kind of like hopeful kind of fantasy romp kind of feel to it. Whereas this new cover, you're like, what is going on here? This feels quite heavy.
Yes.
But yeah, marrying those two things. So the thought I'd had of like slightly changing the feel of the book, and then seeing the cover and going, oh yeah, that fits. that really cemented it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Just not. I didn't expect that to come out of the collaboration. Actually, I kind of thought it would be a more of a one-way thing, but the fact that the cover has fed back, or will do, as I serialize it, is going to feed into the texts somewhat. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah. We're going to wrap up in a little bit, but I didn't know if you had any of the sort of progress of the covers that you wanted to maybe show people before we
Yeah.
hang up the call,
Yeah.
because I'm all about showing like iterations of things.
And Simon, that's all pending my ability to share the screen, which I've never done on the desktop web.
Yeah. Sharing screen is still something that is more arcane and tricky than it should be.
I have a feeling that is true. So okay, I think we're good.
There we go. I can see that. Hopefully everyone else can see.
Yeah. So what I'm sharing here is round 2 of the book covers. I'm going to skip through a bunch of stuff, but what's interesting, this really speaks to that last 10 feet that I was talking about. So just to start off, this is actually the direction that was presented in round 1 that Simon latched onto. And as you can see, like I took this idea of, this oppressive fascist regime, and I really use that to obviously influence color selection and just overall vibe of this cover. I wanted to make it feel like really oppressive and, kind of harkening back to maybe some, old Russia or whatever, but really making the shapes big and blocky. And this was how this crown gear thing was born is, I wanted everything to feel kind of blocky and chunky. And then I just saw that crown shape in those cogs, and I knew that was gold. So I got feedback, and then we went into iterations, and from there, and you'll see, like, this is a great example of just how much change can happen. Even now that we've got a direction, we can still do a lot of different things with the same design. So based on Simon's feedback, I added some ornamentation to the crown. I've got these smaller gears in here still, and definitely playing with type, which is a really big passion for me. I believe there is very few things in design that are more expressive of personality and vibe than typography. It does a lot of heavy lifting, so I take a lot of time in selecting type. But this was kind of a very different take. It's kind of a modern black letter that I thought was really unique, because I'm also trying to do something that feels a little different. So I like the vibe of this. I also, in my presentations, I like to show, the thumbnail standing out in the sea of other types of covers. And then, so I just kind of iterate, and I'm doing really subtle things here. I'm changing color, changing type. You can see I'm like kind of amping up gradients. And then here's where I introduced the rendered crown. And at first it was silver. Then it was gold, but what I liked about this immediately was that it blurred that line between the crown and the gear even more. And so it really kind of pushed that concept even harder, that whoever wears this crown is part of this machine. And so that was great. But ultimately in this round, I actually recommended we go with this version, which was closer to the original. It was just very basic. It was all flat shapes. And I still really, really love this cover. I think it's kind of a more brutalist approach to the look and the illustration. But ultimately, we went with the rendered crown. So here you can see like the 4 different kind of iterations for this final round, and then we just kept iterating. Simon was like, "Hey, do we need those smaller gears? They're not really doing anything." And so just kept pushing.
Yeah, I'd forgotten just how different some of those versions were, to be honest. This process was pretty fast. Like you worked on this in a pretty compressed timeline.
Yeah, we went really quick, and that's again we just landed that solid concept in the first round, which makes a huge difference. And so we were able to kind of cut to the refining part much sooner, and that made for just a quicker project overall.
Yeah, I think my brain has latched onto the final version so much that I was quite startled just then when we looked at the older versions, even though it was only like a couple of weeks ago.
Me too. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Just in case anyone's on here who hasn't actually seen the final version, here it is.
Good point.
just as a reference. So that's where we actually ended up. Where you can kind of see all the different bits and pieces that we've been discussing playing out in this final version.
Yeah, for sure.
And great stuff. We're
proud of it, man. Love how it turned out. So thank you for your collaboration.
No, it's brilliant. And this is going to be the cover that will exist on the serial for months to come. And then I think we're both quite keen to see it in physical print form at some point as well. But when and how, I have yet to figure that one out. But it's going to be fun. Scarlett, I spotted your question in the chat about what's more successful, Wattpad or Substack. I don't think we'll get into that right now, but if you look on my newsletter, I do have an article which is about why I moved from Wattpad to Substack. So I'd recommend going and checking that one out. It depends what you're trying to get out of it, basically. But yeah, anyway, we'll probably wrap it up there, but I do recommend checking out Shane's newsletter, where he's got all the info, what he's up to, and you can tap him up if you're interested in getting a very cool cover. But also, it's the place to go to check out all the other covers he's done as well, because they're well worth looking at.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. But yeah, thanks everyone for jumping on. Hopefully that was an interesting insight into how this all came together. And yeah, I highly recommend, if you get a chance to collaborate with a designer, or in any other capacity, I suppose, working with other people is not something I've really done when it comes to my writing. I shifted from filmmaking into writing novels, partly because I could do it by myself. That's one of the practical nice things about writing a book, but actually having these opportunities where you can work with other people, like Shane, is super cool, and I recommend it.
Man. Great. All right. Well, thank you, Simon, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for showing up.